You're listening to Perspective on Manx Radio. Before the 1 o'clock news, we were talking a little bit about the pressures upon servicemen and women in terms of what they, obviously the situations they're faced with, and some of the effects that has on people, perhaps inevitably, the burden of stress people are put under. From NARPO's point of view, maybe one, Paul, for you, is there a responsibility to offer people that kind of support mechanism post-service then?
Well, that's part of what NARPO is about. We don't have any kind of formal structure in place or a service that we offer. There are facilities available still via the constabulary, and certainly in modern times the constabulary themselves have been quite good in being able to help out where they can. I think historically, though, if you go back certainly through my time, mental health awareness was not a thing talking about. You just had to man up and get on with it. And I think a lot of the time we dealt with that kind of thing just by socialising with one another, because you understood the pressures and the experiences that you've had. So our kind of outlet was usually, going for a few pints after work and that kind of thing, and talking to people who understood it. And I think it's curious as well. Personally, I married a nurse, and I know a lot of police officers have married nurses and people like that, and I think it's because they have that kind of shared experience as well and understand some of the things that you're going through. So yeah, NARPO, we do try and help out where we can. There's still quite a stigma, I think probably among the older generations who we're principally dealing with, obviously. I don't know if stigma's quite the right word, but there's a reluctance, perhaps sometimes it's looked as maybe a bit of a weakness to come forward and ask for help. But I think that is changing, and I think I'm not directly involved in what's going on in the constabulary now, but I think it's great to see that they've got these mental health nurses now on board working with the job. I mean, that's principally for people that they're dealing with, obviously. But I'm sure there's some overspill into that as well, that the guys who are still working and going through the experiences. I mean, what we're talking about now isn't unique. It happened to Hector before his time, and it's still happening to the guys and girls that are serving now, sort of thing. But I think it's great that, and all these things like Mental Health Week, of mental health awareness, and it's okay not to be okay and all that kind of thing. I think it's great that is becoming more and more prevalent now, and that people are more able to accept that maybe they do need help, and that there is some kind of help generally available out there if you're happy to look for it.
Interesting. Do you feel it's sort of still a taboo topic in some way?
Well, I think it's largely sometimes it's easier, isn't it, to talk to someone when you can see they've got a broken arm. How's your arm? Sometimes when people are suffering through some kind of mental illness, sometimes you can't necessarily see that, and sometimes it's difficult to come up with the words. It's difficult to broach the subject. Whereas sometimes just a simple "how are you" is just the easiest intro into having an open discussion about how someone feels. But I think it comes back further to that in my mind. It is that recognition, as Paul says, that some of the things that you'll experience, some of the things that you'll see, you'll hear, you'll smell, all those type of things, they do leave a trace there, and sometimes it's all right at the very beginning just to ask and recognise the fact that what we dealt with there was horrible, firstly, and does anybody want to have a chat about it? But then sometimes it is about shared experiences, and sometimes it's easier to talk to a group of people who can there's that degree of understanding and not necessarily empathy, because I think a lot of people out there have empathy, but they have that shared understanding of what it is that you've experienced.
I think that happens now. Part of NARPO is we have fairly regular social events where guys from Hector's era right through to Kevin and people like that who've just retired, we still get together, and of course all the old war stories come out. But and I think Richard and John will agree, even talking about stuff like that 20, 30, 40, 50 years later is still a help to you to be able to get some of your feelings out, and especially with people who understand and have been through similar things themselves.
To a degree, this is the only opportunity you get, because when it actually happened, and I'm going back a lot of years, obviously, the attitude wasn't the same at all. To sort of say that you needed help, I mean, counselling wasn't heard of. You would have been laughed out of the police station, because the old adage used to be, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. We were the police, we were the guys who responded to whatever was going on, and it was our job to deal with things however unpleasant they were. So in terms of understanding or counselling or help, you could forget it pretty much, because nobody was going to admit to what was then perceived as a weakness of needing help or needing to talk about it. It didn't happen. It's as simple as that. When I joined the police, a lot of the guys were ex-military. They'd either served in World War II or Korea, or they'd done national service or whatever, and the attitude was completely different. If you weren't cut out for the police, if you couldn't deal with unpleasant things, then the suggestion was go and do something else. You weren't going to get any help.
I think society generally is becoming far more open to discuss mental health concerns and illness in a way that it possibly wasn't the case some years ago, which I can only think is a positive thing.
Definitely.
And it is something that people need to open up, and it was really remiss of me, I think, before not to mention the role of our families in that, because the family unit around a police officer sometimes is that first point of call for support and welfare support and dealing with some of those issues that you'll come across in just discussing about how you feel.
Of course, they're there when you come home from some of these things, and you can come home quite broken sometimes. They're the people that are there to support you.
Yeah.
And John mentioned earlier as well, in the outstations.
Yes, in the outstations, like Paul Rose, for instance, my wife used to have to answer the telephone and take urgent calls and relate the call to you and deal with incidents sometimes herself, you know. So the wife the family is a big thing with the police officers. No doubt about that. They deserve recognition, as we do, the police officers themselves,
very
you
much
know.
so, yeah.
Yeah, most definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
But with regard to the mental health side, I'm like the rest of the lads here. We have dealt with quite a few in the old days. As Richard said, you didn't have that. You had to assess the situation yourself, and if you considered it necessary, you called a doctor. The doctor came in and made the decision whether it was somebody that needed certifying, unfortunately, or whether it was just a case of quieting them down and sort them out. But you gained a lot of experience by being on the beat and working with people. And you just had to assess the situation, as I say, call the doctor and deal with it. We didn't have the nurses like that. I think it's a good thing, the mental health awareness now. Excellent, because it really will help the men on the beat.